My name is Dr. Emma Caldwell. I'm 41 years old, and for the past 14 years, my entire life has revolved around the animals and families of Willow Creek. What began as a simple job at a small, family-owned veterinary clinic right after graduation slowly became my purpose, my identity, and my second home. Your profit margins are too low, the man in the tailored navy suit said, tapping his tablet with polished confidence. There are at least 3 areas where we can cut costs immediately. Starting with staff compensation. I sat across from him in stunned silence as Mr. Richard Lawson, the newly appointed regional manager from Silverpaw Veterinary Group, calmly explained that my salary would be reduced by nearly 40%. 14 years of loyalty, long nights, emergency surgeries, and emotional goodbyes were suddenly being translated into cold numbers on a screen. Nothing personal, Dr. Caldwell, he added with a thin corporate smile. Just business. We need to align your compensation with industry standards. Industry standards. The words echoed in my head as I looked around the office I had helped build. The framed photos of recovered puppies, the thank you cards from grieving families, the certificates on the wall that represented years of dedication. This clinic had grown from a 2-room practice into the most trusted animal hospital in the county, and I had been there for every step of that journey. When would these changes take effect? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. Next pay cycle, he replied without looking up from his tablet. We'll need your decision by Friday. 3 weeks earlier, when Dr. Leonard Harper had announced his retirement and the sale of Willow Creek Animal Clinic to Silverpaw, he had assured us nothing would change. They respect what we've built, he had said warmly over dinner. They understand our values. Now, sitting in that office, I realized how wrong that promise had been. Outside, at the reception desk, I found our longtime receptionist, Clara, updating patient records. Her worried eyes met mine instantly. She had already heard. 30% cut for me, she whispered. And reduced hours. In the waiting room, families sat quietly with their pets, an elderly man stroking his golden retriever, a little girl holding a nervous rabbit, a woman comforting her sick cat. These weren't just clients. They were people who trusted us with the lives of those they loved most. A familiar ache settled in my chest. This wasn't only about money. It was about the soul of this place. Later that day, during lunch, I spoke with Dr. Daniel Ross, our newest veterinarian who had previously worked for a corporate chain. It always starts like this, he said grimly. Cost-cutting. Then upselling. Then pressure to treat medicine like a factory line. That evening, I called my former mentor, Dr. Harper. From his quiet lakeside cabin, his voice carried regret. If I had known this would happen, Emma, I would never have sold. After we hung up, I stared at the wall of photos in my office, patients I had cared for since they were born, families who had trusted me in their most painful moments. A thought, bold and terrifying, began to take shape in my mind. Maybe it was time to stop fighting for a place that no longer shared my values. Maybe it was time to build something of my own. And for the first time since that meeting with Mr. Lawson, I felt something stronger than fear rising in my chest. Hope. That night, sleep refused to come. My mind kept replaying Mr. Lawson's calm voice, the numbers on his tablet, and the way the word standards had been used as if compassion and loyalty were outdated concepts. I lay staring at the ceiling of my apartment, listening to the distant hum of traffic, thinking about every animal I had treated, every family that had trusted me with something precious. The next morning, I arrived at the clinic early, as I always did. The familiar smell of disinfectant and coffee greeted me, but the atmosphere felt different now, heavier, tense, like a storm waiting to break. Mia, our head technician of 8 years, knocked on my office door. Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Caldwell, she said softly, but Mrs. Turner is here with her beagle, Charlie. She asked specifically for you, even though she's scheduled with Dr. Patel. Of course, I replied, standing up. I'll see her. Charlie had been my patient since he was a clumsy puppy. As I examined him, Mrs. Turner watched me with the same trust she always had. That trust made my chest tighten. How could I walk away from people like her? How could I stay in a system that would eventually pressure me to treat her like a number instead of a person? Later in the staff room, I found Daniel eating his lunch in silence. You look like someone who hasn't slept, he said. Thinking about the future, I admitted. You worked under corporate ownership before. Does it ever get better? He shook his head slowly. It gets more efficient. More profitable. But the heart of the place disappears. Everything becomes about targets, how many procedures, how many add-ons, how much revenue per hour. I sighed. That's not why I became a veterinarian. That's why I left, he replied. That afternoon, between appointments, I finally gathered the courage to call Dr. Harper again. I'm thinking about opening my own clinic, I confessed. There was a brief silence on the line. Then he said, Emma, you're more than ready. You have the experience, the reputation, and the trust of this community. If anyone can do it, it's you. His words settled into me like a seed. That evening, after the clinic closed, I stayed behind in my office. I pulled out a notepad and began to write locations, costs, equipment, loans. The list grew longer, but instead of fear, I felt clarity. For the first time in weeks, the path ahead began to look real. 2 days later, Friday arrived. At exactly 9 in the morning, I stood outside Mr. Lawson's office, a single envelope in my hand. My heart was racing, but my mind was calm. Come in, he said, not looking up. I stepped inside. I've made my decision. I placed the envelope on his desk. This is my 2 weeks' notice. He finally looked up, genuine surprise breaking through his polished expression. You're resigning. Over a standard adjustment. I'm choosing a different future, I replied quietly. One where patient care comes before profit charts. He leaned back, studying me. You're one of our most experienced doctors. Corporate growth requires adaptation. I understand business realities, I said. And I've made a business decision of my own. By lunchtime, the news had spread. Clara found me near the filing cabinets. Is it true? She whispered. Yes. What will you do? I hesitated, then decided to trust her. I'm opening my own clinic. Her eyes widened, then filled with something like hope. Wherever you go, Dr. Caldwell, people will follow. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers and plans, my phone buzzed with a message from Mia. Whatever you're building, count me in. I stared at the screen, overwhelmed. This was no longer just an idea. It was becoming a movement, a quiet promise that something better was coming. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The following week felt unreal. I moved through my days at Willow Creek Animal Clinic like someone living in 2 worlds at once. On the surface, everything looked normal. I examined patients, reviewed lab results, reassured anxious owners, and shared soft smiles with familiar faces. But inside, a countdown had begun. Every time I walked past the framed photos in the hallway, pets I had treated as babies and later comforted in their final moments, I felt the weight of what I was about to leave behind. One afternoon, as I finished examining an elderly Labrador named Max. His owner, Mrs. Collins, hesitated before putting his leash back on. "Dr. Caldwell," she said quietly, "is it true you're leaving?" The concern in her eyes made my throat tighten. "Yes. In a couple of weeks." Her weight on the leash tightened. "Where will you go?" "Of course wherever you go. That's my mistake." That simple sentence stayed with me long after she left. Later that day, I was called into Mr. Lawson's office again. This time, his tone was different, less confident, more controlled. "We've noticed clients asking about your future plans," he said. "I want to remind you of your contractual obligations. You're not to solicit clients or staff." "I'm aware," I replied calmly. "And I've respected that." He studied me for a moment. "We may be willing to reconsider your compensation package. Perhaps the initial adjustment was too aggressive." For a brief second, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was too late. The decision had already grown roots in my heart. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but my decision is final." That evening, I met Daniel and Mia at a quiet cafe across town. The soft hum of conversation and the smell of coffee surrounded us as I finally spoke openly. "I found a location on Riverbank Drive," I told them. "It used to be a pediatric clinic, so the layout is perfect. I'm calling it Riverbank Animal Hospital." Mia's eyes lit up. "When do you open?" "6 weeks, if everything goes right." Daniel leaned forward. "And your team?" "I need a veterinarian who believes in medicine, not sales targets," I said, meeting his gaze. "An elite technician who puts patients first." They didn't need to say anything. Their smiles said it all. Back at the clinic, however, the corporate grip was tightening. New pricing sheets appeared in the break room. Vaccines, exams, dental cleanings, everything had gone up. Some services had increased by nearly 30% overnight. Worse were the new wellness packages. Bundled tests, many unnecessary for healthy animals, marketed as essential. "They want us to recommend the premium package to every client," whispered Jenna, one of the younger vets. "No exceptions." The next morning, an elderly woman, Mrs. Whitaker, brought in her cat, Chairman, for an arthritis check. The new protocol required a full senior panel, expensive, and in my professional opinion, not yet necessary. "Is it really needed again so soon?" she asked, worry etched across her face. I chose honesty. "Medically, we can safely wait a few months." Before I could say more, the door opened. Mr. Lawson stepped in. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said smoothly, "early testing can prevent serious problems. We wouldn't want to take any risks with Chairman's health." His words were carefully chosen, designed to sound like concern while planting fear. I watched her expression shift from uncertainty to guilt. "In the end," she agreed. After she left, I confronted him. "This isn't about care," I said quietly. "It's about revenue." "This is standardized medicine," he replied. "Your emotional attachment is clouding your judgment." Emotional attachment. Another word for trust, I thought. That night, as I reviewed patient files, I noticed something disturbing. Several long-term clients had been reassigned to other doctors. My name had been quietly removed as their primary veterinarian. They weren't waiting for me to leave. They were erasing me. I went home unable to sleep. At 2 a.m, I opened my laptop and wrote to my lawyer, "Can we open sooner? Even in limited capacity?" Her reply came quickly. With temporary equipment and fast approvals, 2 weeks might be possible. I leaned back, heart pounding. They thought they were cutting me out. What they didn't realize was that they were pushing me forward. My final week at Willow Creek Animal Clinic arrived with a strange mix of sadness and determination. I still walked through the front doors every morning with the same professionalism, greeting clients with a warm smile and speaking gently to nervous pets, but inside, I knew this chapter of my life was closing. The tension in the building was impossible to ignore. Management hovered constantly. Clipboards, tablets, whispered conversations in hallways, everything felt monitored, measured, and controlled. The warmth that once defined the clinic had been replaced by cold efficiency. On Wednesday, Mr. Lawson called me into the conference room. "Several clients have been asking about your future plans," he said, folding his hands on the table. "I need to remind you that any attempt to undermine our business investment will have consequences." "I've told everyone the same thing," I replied evenly. "I have no public plans to announce." He leaned back, studying me. Silverpaw invested heavily in acquiring this practice. "We don't appreciate destruction." "I understand," I said. "And I respect my legal obligations." What I didn't say was that respect did not mean silence forever. That afternoon, Clara slid a faded piece of paper into my desk. Inside was a handwritten list of names. "20 people asked for you today," she whispered. "They wanted to know where you were going." At the bottom she had written, "When you're ready to hire a receptionist, call me first." Emotion swelled in my chest. Loyalty like that couldn't be bought. That evening, I met Daniel and Mia again, this time to finalize details. The lease for the Riverbank Drive location was signed. Temporary exam tables and imaging equipment had been arranged. A local supplier, who had worked with me for years, agreed to flexible payment terms. "We believe in what you're building," he had said. "Independent clinics still matter." Everything was moving fast, faster than I had originally planned, but it felt right. The next day, something happened that erased any remaining doubt. A new fee schedule was posted in the break room. Prices had jumped dramatically. Even more concerning were the comprehensive care bundles, aggressively marketed and clearly designed to maximize billing rather than medical necessity. Jenna stared at the paper in disbelief. "They want us to push the premium package on every single patient," she whispered. "Even healthy ones." Later that morning, an elderly couple brought in their 12-year-old terrier for a routine checkup. According to the new protocol, I was supposed to recommend a battery of expensive tests. "Is all of this really necessary?" the husband asked, glancing at the estimate. I hesitated only a moment before answering honestly. "Not right now. Medically, your dog is stable. We can monitor and reassess later." The relief on their faces was immediate. But it didn't go unnoticed. Within minutes, Mr. Lawson appeared in the hallway. "When we implement protocols," he said quietly but firmly, "we expect full compliance." "Protocols should serve patients, not profit margins," I replied. He checked his watch. "Thankfully, we only have to manage your approach for a few more days." That same afternoon, as I updated records, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Administrative notes showed that nearly all of my long-term patients had been reassigned to other veterinarians, effective immediately. They were cutting the bond between me and the people I had served for years, hoping to weaken whatever followed after my departure. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Mrs. Whitaker, about Chairman the cat, about every family that trusted me to put care before cost. I realized that leaving quietly, as I had planned, was no longer an option. At dawn, I made a decision. I called my lawyer and my equipment supplier. We're accelerating, I said. We open in 2 weeks. The response was simple: we'll make it happen. When I arrived at the clinic for my last day, the air felt heavy with finality. Hugs were exchanged in corners. Eyes glistened. Even staff members who had barely known me seemed unsettled. At noon, Mr. Lawson summoned me for what he called a departure protocol meeting. I expected routine paperwork. Instead, I walked into a room with him, a corporate lawyer, and an HR director. "Before we process your exit," the lawyer said coolly, sliding a document across the table, "we need to address a potential violation of a non-compete agreement." I didn't touch the paper. "I never signed one," I replied. She smiled thinly. "It was included in the acquisition documents." I opened my bag and placed my own file on the table. "I have copies of everything I signed. There is no non-compete clause. And under Kentucky law, even if there were, it would be largely unenforceable for veterinarians." The room went silent. For the first time, Mr. Lawson looked uncertain. They had tried to block my future. Instead, they had just confirmed how afraid they were of it. The tension in the conference room was thick enough to feel. The corporate lawyer and the HR director exchanged quick glances, clearly recalculating their strategy. Mr. Lawson's confident posture had softened, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. "We're not here to argue technicalities," he said at last. "We simply want to ensure a smooth transition for our clients." "Your clients," I corrected gently. "And I agree. Their care should never be disrupted." The HR director cleared her throat, shifting into a more diplomatic tone. "Dr. Caldwell, perhaps we can reach an understanding that protects both sides." What followed was nearly 2 hours of careful negotiation. In the end, an agreement was reached. I would not actively contact Willow Creek's clients for 30 days, and in return, Silverpaw would withdraw any attempt to restrict where or when I could open my practice. No non-compete. No legal roadblocks. When I finally stood up, the chapter that had defined 14 years of my life was officially closed. I packed the personal items from my office, framed photos of patients, handwritten thank you cards, a child's crayon drawing of a dog labeled, "Dr. Emma saved him." Each piece carried a memory, a story, a reminder of why I had chosen this profession in the first place. In the parking lot, Clara hugged me tightly. "This place won't be the same without you," she whispered. "Neither will I," I replied. As I drove away for the last time, my phone buzzed. A message from Clara read, "Just overheard Lawson telling corporate, she's just one vet. How much impact can her leaving really make?" I smiled sadly and typed back, "I guess we'll find out." 17 days later, Riverbank Animal Hospital opened its doors. The timeline had been brutal. Temporary equipment was installed, walls repainted, exam rooms assembled almost overnight. Daniel officially joined as my second veterinarian. Mia came aboard as lead technician after her hours at Willow Creek were cut in half. Clara handed in her resignation the very day our new reception desk arrived, citing a hostile corporate environment in her letter. Our opening was supposed to be quiet, a soft launch with a handful of appointments. At 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before we officially opened, I looked out the front window and froze. A line of people stretched down the sidewalk. Dogs on leashes. Cats in carriers. A familiar beagle wagging his tail excitedly. "Did you call all of them?" Daniel asked, stunned. "No," I whispered. "I only contacted a few urgent cases." Clara, already typing at the front desk, smiled. Word travels fast when trust is involved. As the doors opened, familiar faces poured in. Mrs. Turner with Charlie. Mrs. Collins with Meg's, families who had been with me for years, some for more than a decade. We saw it on the community page, one client said. Everyone said you were opening today. We wouldn't miss it. By lunchtime, we had registered over 70 patients. By closing time, more than double that. They hadn't followed a brand. They had followed their veterinarian. The first week was overwhelming. We extended hours. We added appointment slots. We brought in extra help. Yet, despite the exhaustion, there was a feeling in the building I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. 3 months later, Riverbank Animal Hospital had registered nearly 800 pets, most of them former Willow Creek patients. Community groups buzzed with stories about transparent pricing, honest recommendations, and a clinic that put care before quotas. One afternoon, a familiar face walked through the door. Dr. Harper. He toured the clinic slowly, eyes shining with pride. "You've built something beautiful, Emma," he said. "I should have trusted you with the practice from the start." Everything happened the way it was meant to, I realized. That evening, an email appeared in my inbox. From Richard Lawson, subject: meeting request. He wanted to discuss the changing veterinary landscape in Willow Creek. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's building something so right that they can't ignore it. Richard Lawson's email sat unread in my inbox for hours. Not because I feared it, but because I no longer felt the urgency to react. For 14 years, my time had belonged to others: clients, emergencies, management, schedules. Now, for the first time, my time belonged to a vision I had created myself. Riverbank Animal Hospital was no longer just a dream. It was alive. The waiting room buzzed with quiet conversations and the soft sounds of paws on towel. The walls, freshly painted in warm earth tones, were already decorated with framed photos of our first patients. A golden retriever puppy, a rescued greyhound, a nervous tabby who had finally learned to trust again. Each picture represented a story that had chosen to continue with us. Mia moved confidently between exam rooms, her voice calm and reassuring. Daniel was finishing a complex dental procedure, his focus steady, his movements precise. Clara managed the front desk like she had always done, efficient, kind, and fiercely protective of our clients. This was the team. My team. One afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker walked in with Chairman, her elderly cat. The same woman who had once been pressured into unnecessary tests under Silverpaw's policies now looked visibly relaxed. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "For being honest with me back then. And for opening this place." Her words meant more than any corporate bonus ever could. Yet not everything was easy. The workload was intense. Appointments were booked weeks in advance. Some days we worked 12 hours straight. There were moments of exhaustion, moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I had taken on too much too fast. Then I would remember the love I put in my first meeting. The loyalty. The trust. One evening, after a long day, Daniel stayed with us. "I heard from someone still at Willow Creek," he said. "Their schedule is empty. Clients are leaving. Staff morale is terrible." I closed my eyes briefly. I never wanted them to suffer. I just wanted to practice medicine the right way. "You are," he replied. "And people can feel it." A week later, I finally opened Lawson's email. He wanted a meeting. Neutral ground. Professional tone. Corporate language. I agreed. We met at a cafe downtown. He arrived in the same tailored suit, the same control posture, but something had changed. The confidence was no longer effortless. "You've made quite an impact," he admitted after a few minutes of small talk. "Riverbank is doing very well." "So I've heard," I said calmly. "Silverpaw is reassessing its approach in this region," he continued. "We underestimated the importance of personal relationships." I almost smiled. "Almost. You tried to turn trust into a metric," I said. "It doesn't work that way." He studied me for a long moment. "You know, when you resigned, I said you were just one veterinarian. I didn't think your departure would matter this much." "And now?" I asked. "Now," he said quietly, "I realize you weren't just an employee. You were the foundation." For a brief second, the corporate mask slipped. Not regret, exactly, but recognition. "I didn't come here for an apology," I said. "I came because you asked. And because closure matters." He nodded. "What you built here, it's impressive. Perhaps even a model we should learn from." I stood. "Care first. Business second. That's the model." As I walked back to my car, I felt no anger. No need for revenge. Only clarity. Back at Riverbank, the clinic was still buzzing. A family had brought flowers. A child had taped a drawing to the wall that read, "Thank you for saving my dog." I pinned it beside the others. That night, as I locked the doors, I looked around a space that had once been an empty building and was now a sanctuary of healing and trust. Brian Hayes, no, Richard Lawson, and Silverpaw had thought they could reduce a life's work to a percentage on a screen. They had been wrong. What they had actually done was give me the push I needed to become who I was always meant to be. And the final chapter of this story was only just beginning. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Riverbank Animal Hospital, painting golden patterns across the floor. The clinic was quiet for a moment, the calm before another busy day, but it was a peaceful kind of quiet, filled with purpose rather than pressure. I stood by the front desk, coffee in hand, watching Clara laugh with a client while checking in a nervous puppy. Daniel was already in surgery, humming softly as he prepared his instruments. Mia was comforting a cat in the treatment room, her voice gentle and steady. This was no longer just a workplace. It was a family. 3 months earlier, I had walked out of Willow Creek Animal Clinic carrying a cardboard box of memories and a heart full of uncertainty. Now, I stood in a place built on trust, honesty, and the simple belief that medicine should serve lives, not profit charts. The community had spoken louder than any corporate boardroom ever could. They had chosen care over convenience, relationships over logos. And they had proven something powerful: people don't follow buildings. They follow values. One afternoon, a young couple came in with a rescue dog they had just adopted. The dog trembled, overwhelmed by his new world. I knelt on the floor, letting him sniff my hand, speaking softly until his tail gave a cautious wag. "Thank you for opening this place," the woman said quietly. "We heard you're the vet who left the big chain because you refused to treat animals like numbers." I smiled. Every animal is a story. Every family is a promise. That's how it should be. Later that week, a local newspaper ran a small feature titled, "The Vet Who Chose Heart Over Corporate." I hadn't asked for attention, but the story resonated. Messages poured in, emails, handwritten notes, even baked goods from grateful clients. Each one reminded me that standing up for what's right, even when it's frightening, has a ripple effect. One evening, as we closed up, Daniel looked around the bustling clinic and said, "You know, this place feels like what Willow Creek used to be before the takeover." "Maybe," I replied. "But it's more than that. It's what it was always meant to become." My phone buzzed with a final message from Rachel Anderson. "Congratulations on your success. It seems you were right. Fair countries standardized." I had a sharp reply: "Some things are measured in trust, not numbers." As I turned off the lights and locked the door, I felt a deep sense of peace. The fear, the uncertainty, the long nights of doubt, they had all led to this moment. I hadn't just saved my career. I had protected the bond-between humans and the animals they loved. And in doing so, I had built something no corporation could ever take away, a place where compassion came first.